Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to explore the issue of how will we all live, or how might we all live, as the globalist plan to dismember, crush, destroy Western society gathers pace, and it certainly is gathering pace. I think the Brexit vote and Donald Trump becoming president sort of scared them, and so they're trying to really move it along at a faster pace now, and it's which means they can no longer, to whatever extent they were before, they can no longer hide it. They're sort of quite out front about it now, and they're quite open, saying we're going to do this. There's not a damn thing you can do about it. We control all the major political parties. We control all the institutions. We control the media, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. Now, that's I'm sure there's many governments thought that before they got dragged off to the guillotine. But anyway, given that's their view, and it certainly is, then we've got probably a better than even chance that they'll succeed. And so let's just explore that possibility as to how will we live, in the decades to come. And I don't think the sort of hard times that are I think not very far away. I think they're coming pretty soon. I think in the next few years, when you look at the price of energy, electricity, and price of petroleum and gas and all these sorts of things to run vehicles, heat your homes, cool your homes, all that sort of stuff. There's not many people can really afford that, given the projections as to what prices are going to be like. So last year, we're fairly modest users of energy, and we've got quite an efficient sort of energy set up and very high energy efficient appliances, but we're going to be paying double this year than what we paid last year. But there are people in England who, in US dollars terms, even just an ordinary 3-bedroom household, they could be looking at an energy bill for the year of $20,000. Now that's that's for the average household. For a lot of people, that's a lot of money. Now, if you're well-to-do, then you may not like paying it, but you can afford it, and you can virtue signal your ass off, saying, "Well, I'm paying $20,000, which you can easily afford, but I'm doing it to save the planet and to stop those damn fascist Nazis who don't agree with it." So you can be incredibly virtuous by doing it, But we need to understand Western society as things change. Western society is coming off the high point of the entire history of human civilization. Never has a particular group or civilization been as wealthy, and that wealth has been widely dispersed and shared by many. Never in human history has it been like this. Now, you can find rich elites all throughout history that were doing okay, and the sort of middle-class Roman citizen was kind of doing all right, but if we look at net wealth and diet and access to medical care and all these sorts of things, then there is no society ever in human history that's been this prosperous. So we're coming off the high point. So it's not even going to bump along at the prosperous level it was, or marginally and incrementally improve. There's only downside from here on in. So this is the measure. We're not already at a low point going lower. We're at the highest of the high points. Access to credit, for example, this is higher than it's ever been. Now, maybe the lifestyle that a lot of us were leading was artificial, in the sense that, I know people where the cost of living day to day is such that they need $1 million a year in income, because they've got the waterfront home, they've got the flashy cars in the driveway, they've got kids at the most expensive private schools, and they vacation in the executive lodges in Aspen every year, and so on. So they need that sort of big bucks, but some of them, even on the big bucks, they're going to be, if the interest rates go up to any appreciable extent, they're going to be hurt. So the pain could be quite widespread, other than those who've got net assets that substantially exceed their debts, but nonetheless, let's have a look, and it's very important you understand we're coming off the high point rather than bumping along at a low point. So let's look at say Western Europe between 1860 and 1890, and what's the average worker, how are they living at that time? Now, remember, there's a lot of movement from at the same time as Western Europe, particularly Britain, was industrializing. There were also big changes happening in agriculture. Some of the farms were getting bigger, and there were much more efficient methods of sowing crops, methods of harvesting, methods of storage and warehousing, transport. The railways were getting much bigger. So the amount of workers that were needed on farms was really declining, and the amount of tenant farmers that were needed was also declining. The landlord or the aristocrat that owned the big farm didn't need that many workers anymore, and so they were being displaced and moving to the city. Now, in the country, you had your own little plot of land and your own house and all that sort of thing, and a lot of your wealth came from bartering. So you would give the guy around the corner, you would give him some eggs from your hens, and he would give you some milk from his cow, and that sort of stuff. So the standard of living was actually quite high, but a lot of it from barter rather than from purchasing power of a wage. So these people moved to the cities as they were displaced from the country. So really, I'm going to look at those people. How did they live? Because I think we're heading back to something approximating that, where there was really a rich elite, and there wasn't so much as, there was a small mercantile class and a small sort of engineering class, if you like, but everyone else was living, when they were displaced from the country, was living in the city, and they didn't have, it was gig employment back then, which we have now, and so people could be out of work for long periods of time. They couldn't afford access to medical care. They couldn't afford access to transport. They couldn't afford access to clean water to drink or to wash in, and so on. They couldn't afford access to, well, they didn't really have the technology then of flushing toilets and the like. But no. So how did they live? Well, they worked in they couldn't afford to buy property, and it was something like 60% of the population couldn't even afford to rent. So how did they live? Well, there were boarding houses or lodging houses. Now, what these were, there was a set amount of beds in these places, and you would rent a bed for 8 hours. Now, there was sort of one toilet in what was like a barracks. You'd say it was a barracks, like a warehouse with lots of beds or something, and a barracks type accommodation, or it could be in a converted house, but you rented that bed, and the next guy would come in and sleep in the bed, people who were working night shift or those sort of things. So it was very much revolving around shift work. So you didn't own anything. You didn't even own the bed. Didn't even own the sheets on the bed. So you would sleep on this bed that someone else had just got up from. So you can imagine the implications for hygiene here. So you rented that, and on that floor there would have been one toilet or an outside toilet, which would be like a septic tank or something like that, or maybe one of those tin drums that gets emptied out every couple of days by a guy who comes around with his horse and cart to take the effluent away. And you'd have three baths at the tin baths on the floor at the end of that sort of barracks type accommodation, and then you would have to pay for the hot water and any soap or scrubbing brush or something like that. So then you'd have to pay for your clothes to be washed, and so everything that you had access to had to be rented momentarily. so you didn't own anything, you didn't rent anything, you didn't have a lease on something, and everything was very temporary and very casual and very precarious. So you sort of lived, day to day, minute to minute, really. And at any time, the factory or the place you work, you go, okay, no more work. Don't need this many people. Yeah, and you'd be on the street, and you'd have to rely on that the city had proper provisions for things like soup kitchens and the like. So that was how it was. I mean, probably started a bit earlier in Britain, but so I'm thinking now of provinces around Germany and so on, 1860 to 1890. That was how a lot of people lived. So it's very communal living. There could be, in a 6-bedroom house, that there could be 35, 40 people, 50 people living there on this rotating around the beds. Now that happens today with Indians and Chinese and other third world peasants that are brought to the West. In a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, they can have 25, 30 people rotating around on shifts, rotating around, mattresses on the floor, bunk beds, all that sort of stuff. And they just one person gets up and goes off to it, the next person drops into bed and sleeps, then comes out again. There's one toilet between 30 people, and one shower or bath, and so on. So they live very, very communally. Now, even when sort of Indian, for example, Indian could be Chinese, Indian families come to Australia, their first sort of effort and their absolute, as soon as one of them makes it here, they try and bring over as many relatives as they can, including cousins and second cousins and fuck knows what, and they rent or buy, again, 5, 6-bedroom houses in some of the less expensive parts of Sydney. There's no yard or garden or grass around the place. There's just the house and maybe 18 inches of land around the perimeter of the house before the next house is, the next block of land where another house the same is. So they live 3, if not 4 generations in the one house. So the grandparents look after the kids. Every able-bodied adult is out at work, and it's a model that it allows them to prosper to some extent. Even if, and I watched the Chinese group do this. They came over, multiple. I think there was three generations plus a couple of the brothers and cousins and shit came in, and they did the same thing. The mattresses on the floor, rotating around shifts. So there was always, as far as I could tell, like 4 of them at work at any one time, and grabbing all the. So they're all cleaners, I think, but they were working 80 hours a week as cleaners, and I think there were maybe 8 or 9 of them working. One of them had children. I think one of the couples had children, and the grandparents were in there looking after the children and doing the cooking. So there was always, so they'd come back from a long shift. They'd have dinner and just sort of kind of just crash onto the mattress and get up again and repeat the same exercise. But their household income was quite good, given that organisation. And I think communal living is where things are heading. People just won't be able to afford to live in even with 2 incomes. 3 or 4 incomes are going to be required very soon in the West, and it's going to be artificially driven and pumped and pushed along by the globalists through artificial pumping of gasoline prices, petroleum, natural gas prices, electricity prices, cost of transport, the cost of property. They're going to push it hard on all fronts, food, and make sure that really you just can't live on what traditionally could have been a breadwinner income or even double income. Even today in Sydney, 2 people making the average income, which, remember, is more than 60% of the workforce are going to be earning this or in this sort of situation. Even with 2 average income earners, they can't afford children, not without a very difficult standard of living or asking for government government handouts of one sort or another, and they'll be living, on used clothes from the charity shops and things like that. So I see that as the where things are heading, and I think for single people on lower wages, those boarding houses and where you just rent a bed for 8 hours, I think that's not far away. I'd say it's within the next 20 years easily, particularly if the globalists get away with the scam that they're pushing now with the energy cost. To save the planet, we're all going to die. And what fucking lies, the fucking liars. I mean, it's insane, the lies they tell and get away with. But look, if you own the government and the politicians, you own the media, you own the institutions, you own the think tanks, all that sort of stuff. You can suppress any opinion you don't like, then you really believe you can get away with this. I mean, goodness sakes, I hope they don't. But I think that's where things are going. And I think we're all going to be, zombies sort of living day to day. And in those days, if people died at 50, and you look at all the gravestones in the cemeteries from people who died from that time, and even afterwards, that at last Billy Bob rests in peace, that his life was so wretched day to day and such a struggle, and he existed on the margins, and he didn't live, he existed. And so now he's dead and he's now at peace. At last he's at peace from the wretched struggle of day-to-day life. And that was how they viewed it back then. Well, not everyone, the rich were doing all right, but or there was some bright guys who started up businesses or invented the steam engine or something like that. So those things will be around. But there's not many of those people. They're what, 1 in 1,000, if that. So for the rest of the population, I think that's where it's going, and it's a diabolical hellscape, particularly from where we've come, and how unnecessary it is, how manufactured and engineered it's been by the globalists. Those fucking assholes. But that's, I think, where we're at. But I'd like to see your opinion below. Maybe I'm being too pessimistic about it. Maybe there's this great socialist nirvana around the corner where we'll all be led into this into the light by black lesbians or something. Maybe that's what's around the corner. I don't think so, but I'd like to see your opinion. You've been a Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening. Honey bun.